day. This is the Martalks podcast, and I'm Daryl Rosenstein, your host. We discuss current issues in the e-commerce and martech universe. And today we're very fortunate to be joined by Gordon Cooke, the founder and CTO of UpStart Commerce, a MACH-aligned vendor of microservice-based architecture for e-commerce platforms for the B2B, B2C, direct-to-consumer community. Gordon, welcome.
Well, thank you, Daryl. It's great to be here.
Now, UpStart is actually your second go now as a founder, having first led a digital agency, SparkRed, which was actually an Oracle Commerce partner, working primarily with the ATG monolithic stack, which is still out and about in quite a volume in the marketplace, astoundingly. That was all before founding UpStart as their CTO. And I guess my first question is, how would you contrast leading a commerce services agency implementing an absolutely gigantic platform to leading a cutting-edge mock commerce platform provider?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's actually a lot of similarities. At SparkRed, we were responsible for the management and hosting of this monolithic platform, ATG, that was really designed in a pre-cloud era. But in the process of doing that, I learned a lot about what worked and what didn't work for retailers. Like I spent a lot of time talking to them about, downtime deployments and accountability and, who they're going to come to when there's a problem and all those kinds of things. So, it really was an opportunity to learn from my point of view. And then, in the transition to UpStart Commerce, I was able to take a lot of that and in working with my co-founders, really inject a lot of the concerns, like solutions to a lot of the concerns into the product. In today's day and age, the idea of having a 2 o'clock in the morning, all hands code deployment every 3 or 4 months is, it's just not acceptable. Having downtime even for a few minutes can cost companies millions and millions of dollars. So it's just really being able to take the lessons that I learned at SparkRed in that paradigm of a services organization and working closely with retailers and be able to build a product that meets those concerns.
When you're working with retailers, those concerns change on a daily basis, as do the requirements.
Absolutely.
So often in the middle of a major project. So, kudos to you for having survived that with a hairline. I didn't. So, well done. Now, as the CTO, obviously, you're engaged in a number of your sales processes at various stages of the discovery and presentation and validation process. And, before you were actually in an agency environment, primarily handling a client after they'd already made a selection. So there's a lot of differences in terms of how the sales motions play out. But what do you see as the biggest challenge today in explaining mock architecture and implementation to clients?
Yeah, I think, mock has been around for a while now. It's not necessarily a new concept. And I think a lot of the retailers actually, at some level, understand what it means. Like they understand microservices, they understand API first. Headless is something that I've been working with. Even before I left SparkRed, we were starting to deal with and work with retailers who were going headless. It's not so much about explaining like the mock architecture and the value of that. It's more the company culture and how people have to change their thinking from a monolithic stack like ATG to a platform like, UpStart Commerce or any mock system. How you build your development teams, how you build your requirements, how you build your front end, it all changes drastically. And that's really a cultural shift at the company. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges in the sales cycle is making sure that the retailer, the potential customer is clear about the change that's coming. Yeah, and it's a different skill set. Like their development teams historically have been built around large scale back-end Java implementations or something similar to that. And now a lot of that's going to transition away from a really heavy back end to a much more lightweight front end. And it changes the dynamic in the company.
Well, I mean, it would seem that so many of the advantages are self-evident in the technology. You think about time to market being a third when you want to introduce a new product, when you want to re-merchandise your entire platform, when you want to launch a new store or a new brand, when you want to launch a new country. I mean, all of these things take place exponentially faster with mock architecture. And it's all about innovation and being fresh and being relevant with your content, with your product, and responsive to your clients in retail, which is one of the reasons we love the vertical. It's just such a dynamic, ever-changing environment. You'd think that the chief digital officers of the world would all be aligned that we've got to have it to future-proof ourselves, and we've got to have it because it's just so much easier. But yet there's that hesitancy coming from the C-suite in a lot of these retailers is, what do you mean I have to have 5 or 6 or 7 different contracts in order to replace what I've currently got duct taped together and on life support in the server room with Oracle or Hybris or Salesforce Commerce?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that as with a lot of things, the greater flexibility does come with a greater complexity, right? Like you can build a very, very flexible platform, and this isn't specific to e-commerce, but in this case, we're talking MACH, and it applies directly. You can build that system that's really, really flexible, but the implementation of that platform then does bring an innate complexity to it that you have to manage. And I think that the C-suite that you're talking about, like there's a general concern about, or a general lack of understanding of what that complexity looks like and how to manage it. And it's been my experience that as long as you understand the complexity ahead of time and you manage that complexity, things can go very smoothly, very quickly, and you can actually fulfill on your company's vision and goals appropriately. But if you don't manage that complexity because of lack of understanding, or you're just moving too fast or whatever else, you can get tangled up in it. And I think that might be one of the concerns that a lot of the people in the C-suite have, is just that lack of in-depth understanding.
Yeah, I look at the clients that I speak to, the founders of MACH Alliance and companies that aren't part of MACH but have API-led development that are microservice based. And haven't made the leap to join the MACH Alliance, but still have a solution that essentially it's for the users. It's no code, low code. So it's so much easier for the developers to use. It's so much easier for the business leaders to use. You've got a situation where, yeah, all of your pain is front loaded, but still that go live process takes less time by a wide margin over standing up a traditional enterprise storefront.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on projects that, go lives that have taken years effectively. That's one of the beauties of the whole MACH architecture, though, is even on those monolithic platforms, you can start to shave off pieces of it and, dip your toes into the water, so to speak, of MACH by pulling out, maybe you pull out your pricing, or maybe you pull out your inventory, you pull out a piece of the puzzle that makes up your monolithic system, disconnect it from everything else. And that gives you a lot of flexibility to really see what your internal culture is going to, like what that cultural shift looks like, how to manage the change in the development cycles and the release cycles and all of it. And, I think that's the appropriate thing to do.
Well, I mean, that componentized approach obviously is the hallmark of the technology. And I also absolutely think that, one of the things that's discovered along that process, I mean, is that having the actual responsibility for content, having the responsibility for the buyer's journey and not having to hand it off or having to wait for someone in IT to execute a function in the wee hours of the morning is, it should be first and foremost what is being presented to that buyer, to that committee of buyers, because it's obviously, we know, it has to be you have to address the CFO, the CIO, the head of merchandising, whoever the chief digital officer is, the chief marketing officer. I mean, they all have very strong opinions, and some of them might have some real incentive if they perhaps had made the purchase decision for that legacy product that has been limping along on life support. Let's talk a little bit about how important it is, since you were on the agency side, to have that digital agency partner, because increasingly, since there's going to be multiple products that are going to be stood up simultaneously or in series, if we're doing pulling off a piece at a time, they're really maintaining that relationship. They're the signal caller. So, in your opinion, what agencies do you currently see providing the best support for implementing MACH commerce, and what have you done there at UpStart to enable them?
Yeah, the people that we work really closely with, DMI, I think that having a good implementation partner is a critical piece of it. One of the things we've been enjoying is the partnership that we have with them, where it's back and forth. Like, they point out to us where we can make improvements to simplify APIs for their consumption. And on the flip side of it, we make sure that we provide what they need to get their job done as efficiently as possible. So it's been a really great back and forth learning curve. But I think that's the critical piece for any agency or any partnership, really, is that ability to learn from each other. There's, I'd say, a number of other companies out there doing MACH and doing it very well, in the content space, in the the kind of add-on services that you need for commerce around taxes and payments and everything, like all the kind of things you don't want to handle internally on a platform. As MACH becomes more and more prevalent, those companies are going to rise to the top, the ones that are already out there and doing it. They're going to have the background, they're going to have the experience, and they're going to have the APIs developed to a point where they're simple to use, and that's the critical piece.
You're talking about, again, having an agency that's really their win is your win, having that win-win scenario, defining with them what does success look like for you, and managing towards that goal in terms of not just how you train them, how you develop, but how you incorporate their feedback into the product. And being able to have that two-way communication is absolutely essential. I feel like agencies with the monoliths were in the unfortunate circumstance that, hey, we promised a whole bill of goods to this client. They have no clue that it's going to be 18 months, 24 months before they're going to have this thing up and running. And by the way, there might be some issues during that process. Like, we can't find anybody to hire that's actually an Oracle architecture expert. Try to do that now.
Going back to what you were saying about, the difference between digital agency and, my role as a CTO at UpStart and in the sales cycle and everything else, in the past, it was that if something went wrong on a system, the end client may or may not know who to call, right? Like, it might be the hosting provider, it might be the application developer, it might be the managed layer in the middle there. It could be any one of 10 different people. And there was always, it was not uncommon to have a lot of finger pointing going on. And I think that's one of the things that is changing from my point of view. And one of the things I really took away from that experience is, how do you reduce that obstacle for the retailer so that they're comfortable with what they're working on. But I think that's an important piece of it, is especially as microservices grow and expand and change, and you start dealing with multiple vendors and multiple contracts and all those kinds of things, to have a single site, having a partner that you can work very closely with. From our point of view, having those agencies means that instead of dealing with the finger pointing and everything else, that, they bring us the problem, we go resolve the problem, regardless of who we need to connect to in order to do that.
Well, from a technology perspective, there's certainly a plethora of platform providers out there that have advantages, disadvantages, and some have more limitations than others. But in terms of the architecture that you've designed there at UpStart, what led you to design a portal API and a commerce API management function as being kind of the hallmarks of your functionality?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we started building the original platform, there were really only a couple players in the MACH space as relate to e-commerce, and there really wasn't a good out-of-the-box management tool that was provided with a lot of the APIs at the time. And we really looked at it from the point of view of what's going to take care of our customers. I mean, that's one of the things that we really drive towards, is how do we simplify our customers' lives? How do we make their job simpler so that they can drive their revenues, connect to their customers, all those kinds of things. And, providing the APIs to handle the management functions that you need on any e-commerce platform, adding products, updating pricing, modifying inventory, like whatever that is one thing. But then to expect that the customer is going to, on top of migrating their front end site, also build like their own management portal or integrate with their management portal set of APIs it's just not fair to the customer. It's not taking care of them. So, we really looked at how can we build a view into our system that allows for integrations with external systems, that really takes the MACH concept and provides the tool set that our customers will need to manage their day-to-day. And that's really where the portal API stuff, side of things came from. And, we build all our APIs first, the portal comes out of that. And it's also a great way for us to make sure that what we're building on the back end works on the front end.
Well, you've obviously got a very talented team that has been with you, and many have joined you from your prior incarnations. But at this point, obviously, you've had over decades the opportunity to hire a bunch of developers, a bunch of technologists. What do you see is making the ones who are really successful in a startup software company versus unsuccessful?
The thing that I really look for is intellectual curiosity. To some degree, like there's developers all over the world of different degrees. And having somebody who can write code is great, but you really want somebody who challenges why they're writing the code. So they're looking at not just how do I fulfill this requirement, but is there a larger requirement or a larger picture that I want to fulfill as well? When we talk to and interview potential candidates, we're really looking for, are they questioning what we're asking them, or are they just, going through the motions? And I think that's really critical. What we look for, as well as what we look to avoid, is the cultural match, right? Like, we have a particular way that we want our company to feel for our employees. Like, we want it to be a welcoming workspace. We want people to feel like they can speak their mind. If, somebody who's straight out of college on their first development job has a really great idea, they should be able to voice that and not feel like they're being, squelched. So we really do look for, people that are on the as they grow into managers, can support that level of expression. And then, the other big thing is there's a huge difference between doers and thinkers. And there's people who are purely intellectual and they want to think everything through, but they're not necessarily really good at delivering. And then on the flip side, there's people who are really good at delivering, but will only do exactly what they're told and deliver it, right? And you really want to find a healthy mix of those two things, ideally in one person.
That is the trick. I mean, we spend the bulk of our time helping early stage firms put in place their first sales teams, and it's all evangelism at that point, and it's all white. There's no white space out there, no logos to mine. It's all about going out and being the first person that these clients have ever heard of, and presenting a go to market that is evolving on a daily basis. And the folks that can do that, those intrepid evangelists and greenfield territory creators, they need to think outside of the box. They need to do something that hasn't been done before, not just with the clients, but internally. They need to be a part of creating their role. They need to help define what is it they're going to be doing on a daily basis. What is our sales process? What is our go-to-market? What is our what's the best pitch deck to use? I mean, granularly. And then the first head of sales that they hire, again, needs to be someone that hasn't been in a strategy role forever, or an overall management role where they have lost touch with how to engage customers initially. It's a tough balancing act, and it's universal across all the departments with a startup. But I appreciate your thought. It sounds like you don't have a lot of elbows being thrown around the coffee machine.
Well, I mean, I think every company has their ups and downs with employee, individuals, and I'm not saying we haven't had our struggles, but I think that we've definitely created a culture where people are welcome. People are able to voice give voice to their concerns, give voice to their ideas, voice their opinions about technology and direction and everything else, from the lowest level all the way up to the highest level. It's really important to us that we maintain that. So,
well, I think one of the wonderful things about UpStart and all of the companies that are in this API first revolution is that by its very nature, you're challenging the status quo. You're challenging a very staid, a very antiquated form of business, and you're bringing innovation and speed to your clients. And as a result, the kind of people that have been drawn to it are folks that are change agents, that are intellectually curious and do those sorts of things. But what do you think is the biggest impediment to scaling a commerce startup?
I think there's a couple things. I think back about how I learned about retail or coming through development, right? Like I happened to be working on ATG before the commerce package was there, and then I fell into knowing ATG and then fell into commerce. Over the last 20 years, though, I've developed a lot of domain knowledge, right? From the development point of view, from the technology point of view. And I think that, one of the challenges is finding technologically savvy resources, people that understand and can work inside of the retail and e-commerce domain. It's very easy for you and I, who have been around for a long time, to sit here and talk about SKUs and inventory and pricing, and we understand the nuance of some of those things. But you take a developer that's never been exposed to it, and it's all Greek, proverbially. It really does. You really do have to have a plan in place to provide the domain knowledge for whatever your problem set is as a startup to your people that you're onboarding and bringing in to do the work. I think that's a critical piece. Having the connections in the industry is another part. Sales are always a challenge, but beyond sales, the partnerships, the relationships, the things that help you, partner with somebody for a front end, all those kinds of things are a critical piece of it. And then, the unspoken money. That's the big one.
We talk often about the role venture capital plays in driving these startups. And, it's interesting that a lot of companies are profitable, and by design, that are particularly the ones that are bootstrapped, but yet when they go for their next round of funding to really expand upon that success, if they're profitable, they're kind of persona non grata amongst the investment community. And I don't know why, particularly as we're heading into a recession, there aren't more investors who would be excited about a company that's, hey, we've already got our ducks in a row, man. It's about bringing it to the masses.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. We are bootstrapped, and we are very mindful of the how we spend our money, where we spend it, and the impact that has on our growth, on our product development, on all the other things. And we really do make a point of focusing on that. The resources that we have where they're going to make the most difference. And I think that we've been doing that very well. And venture capitalists are always looking at it from a what's going to be the return on their investment, and it's not really about profitability, it's really about return. And from an investor's point of view, that makes a ton of sense. But as we head into a recession, and if you look at how venture capital has been going over the last few weeks and months, there's been a significant change. So we'll see where that lands.
Yeah, I mean the big money, the Series Bs or NCs and follow-on rounds, and are going to be sidelined for the most part. It's kind of make it or break it for those companies at that stage. We're certainly seeing plenty of companies that are bringing new ideas to the investment community at the seed series, pre-seed series, Series A, landing their round successfully because there's more money in those coffers than there's ever been. So it's certainly we're not gonna see innovation drop off the planet, but I mean it's going to be a slow time for those companies that are after that round where they know what they want to be when they grow up.
And I think there's a gap in the investment community where you've got pre-seed and angel funding and all that really early stage, and then you have I've already got my product out on market and I've already got some customers, and I've been able to at length, like to some level of assurity, prove out the concept where you've got millions in revenue, you've got 10, 15, 20 clients, whatever it is. And that's where the next round of investment comes in. But there's this middle range in there where you're really kind of past seed funding, but you're not quite at Series A, Series B funding yet. And I think that especially for people who are bootstrapped, that can be a really challenging time if you're not careful.
Well, I hope whatever you need, you get.
I'm confident we'll get there. As I said, we're been very careful about how we spend our money, and we're in solid shape.
Well, I think one of the beautiful things about retail e-commerce is that there's so many former operators from technology companies that have joined the investment community and were successful operators, and as a result, they're excited about the improvements in the consumer experience and the improvements in the performance and the improvements in the scalability all across the board that the MACH technologies are bringing to the marketplace, and make great partners instead of just showing up an hour a month to lecture you or do essentially receive a report, and that's that. But it's one of the reasons I really like the vertical. Well, I think to close, I can ask you the big question, which I've asked everyone, which is, what messaging do you think is needed to clarify and simplify the value of MACH to merchants?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things in there. For sure. I think the first thing is being clear that it takes something to move from a monolithic legacy platform to a MACH platform, and it's not just a change in technology. You got to be honest about the pros and cons. The rate of change on some things gets really, really fast, but as I said earlier, with great flexibility comes great complexity, and you got to be able to manage for that. And if you're not clear about that from the get-go, some of the value of MACH can get lost. Cultural shift inside of a company is one of the things that will make or break a company's successful transition. Understanding ahead of time how you're going to rearrange your internal resources, rearrange your thinking. All of a sudden you have a content provider, over here, a tax provider over there, e-commerce system over here. How are you going to bring all those together in a single cohesive unit and work with it? And I think that when retailers start to understand that, it means that if they don't like their current provider for something like taxes, they can jump to somebody else relatively easily. I think the value of MACH is really straightforward, really quickly. The one of the things that I've heard in previous lives is the whole conversation about vendor lock-in. You've got a 5-year contract and a multi-million-dollar investment in this particular thing, and with MACH, you gain a lot more flexibility in how you can leverage that. So if you don't like somebody's pricing service, you go find somebody else's that works for you. And I think that when retailers start to really, really understand the power of that and the flexibility of that, it becomes obvious that it's an obvious choice. A lot of the other bits and pieces are things about, deployment cycles, downtime, management of such things. If you look at a lot of specifically on the monolithic platform side of things, retailers have spent so much time and so much money working around not taking their systems out while they do a major deployment. I used to work for one retailer where if we were shut down for an hour, it cost them $2 million, literally, in sales, even at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, pushing a deployment out was a big deal. When you can say, I don't have to take your system down, you can just roll it and go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as opposed to 2 o'clock in the morning, it becomes a whole different world of stability, and MACH future-proofs retailers. It's really one of the things that we really looked at when we started building UpStart was, we first asked ourselves the question first, why microservices, before we started building them? And the answer is really, really simple. As technology progresses, as feature functionality changes, as the needs of the market change, as consumers change, a MACH approach provides you the ability to very quickly and easily follow that trend, whatever that trend is, without having to rip out the guts of your entire platform. And that can all be done seamlessly and, in lockstep with the market. So again, when retailers start to understand these things, it becomes a very obvious choice.
So no straitjackets, because you're crazy to be using that old monolith.
I am not sad to see the monolith go.
Neither will everyone who has them. Well, Gordon, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation, some great points, and we will look forward to some tremendous victories showing up for UpStart Commerce.
Well, thank you, Daryl, and I really appreciate your invitation. And it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to Martalks. Please leave a review and a rating on your platform of choice. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcast platforms. To find out more about how the Rosenstein Group can help you find the right leaders for your client development teams in MarTech and e-commerce, please visit our website, rosensteingroup.com.